You are constructing a human being with your relationship and your attitudes, your mindsets toward your children. And you are giving them, not deliberately or explicitly, but everything about your interactions with them is teaching them what to expect from other people, what to expect in the world, and how to feel about themselves.
That was Lindsay Gibson on Psychologist Off the Clock. We are 5 experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, author of Act for Burnout and Act Daily Journal.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy-supportive Parenting.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Harold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and the author of an upcoming book on developing your confidence and social skills.
From Boston, I'm Dr. Yael Schoenbrunn, faculty at Brown University and author of Work, Parent, Thrive, and an upcoming book about misunderstanding. And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock.
Hey listeners, just a super quick reminder that you can listen to the podcast ad-free by supporting us on Patreon for just $5 a month. Or you can support the podcast with a one-time donation on Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you to everyone who's already supporting us. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of the episode for our co-host discussion of today's interview.
Lindsay Gibson is back on Psychologist Off the Clock, and you can color me excited. Lindsay is a clinical psychologist who specializes in working with adult children of emotionally immature parents, and her book on that topic became a #1 bestseller that has genuinely changed how a lot of people understand their childhoods. I first interviewed her on Psychologist Off the Clock for episode 263, which we'll link to in the show notes. And somewhere between the recording ending and Lindsay mailing me unprompted a copy of Carl Rogers' On Becoming a Person, she became one of my favorite humans, which also proved to me that one of the most powerful pathways to an incredible friendship is trading books. And I hope that we start a revolution with that, Lindsay.
I do too.
Lindsay's back today with her brand new book, How to Raise an Emotionally Mature Child, which is such a comprehensive guide for parenting from infancy all the way through adulthood. And I'll say this, if you don't have kids or your kids are grown, don't tune out, because so many of the principles Lindsay lays out in her book apply equally well to adult relationships. Understanding, connection, emotional attunement. It turns out these are the skills we need at every age with every person we care about. Today, we're going to focus less on the developmental phases of parenting and more on the core principles of parenting, the mindsets and habits that you can return to again and again, whether you're managing a toddler's meltdown or a teenager's silence, or if you don't have kids, maybe a partner's misunderstanding. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you, Yael, for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to chat about your book. Okay, so just as a quick foundation, and this kind of harkens back to adult children of emotionally immature parents, can you help orient us to understanding what emotional immaturity looks like in a parent? What are the hallmarks that you see again and again in your work that get expressed through the adult children that you work with?
The most striking characteristic that stands out to me and has had the most effect on my clients is the central egocentricity, the central self-centeredness. And I say that in a way to be descriptive, not pejorative, not to put them down, in the same way that I would say that a 4-year-old is very egocentric, because they're supposed to be that way. That's the level they're at, and that's what they have to do in order to, have a good life. They have to pay attention all the time to what's going on with them in order to keep themselves stable and functional. But when you're an adult and you're a parent and all roads lead to your concern of the moment, that makes it really hard for you to be available to your child emotionally. And so the emotionally immature parent is kind of, psychologically speaking, like being parented by, kind of a 4-year-old. They have language. They seem pretty smart. They can do a lot of things. But what they can't do is they can't regulate their emotional stability by themselves, and they can't regulate their self-esteem. So they create relationship dynamics, even with their children, where other people have to step in and sort of function as this external adult energy to keep them in a good place and contained. But because they have very low empathy, they don't realize the effect of their behavior on other people, much less their children. And they tend to be very driven by emotion and impulse and, I would say, reactivity. So if something bothers them emotionally, they don't have the wherewithal to stand back and sort of think about that. They just react impulsively as if a child would. And then the other thing is that for them, reality is kind of optional, just like it is for the toddler and the preschooler. They make reality into what they want it to be. And that, for a child whose parent is sort of doing that gaslighting, reality bending sort of thing, that is extremely hard to deal with emotionally, because everything becomes untrustworthy about that parent's reaction to them. So it ends up being a situation for the child where they can't really count on that adult to have empathy for them, or even really to help them with dealing with life and situations, because the parent is just going to get reactive along with them, or the parent's going to get critical and judgmental about the situation. There's not going to be much help at all. So when you're dealing with that, lots of times what happens in the clients that come in to see me is that they have been trained to think of other people first all the time, because they feel like it's up to them to make sure that other people are in a good mood, or they're not suffering, or they're not worried about something. And that kind of behavior makes it hard for them to develop a trust in their own intuition, their own sense of self. So by the time they come to therapy, lots of times they're confused about what they really want, how to be in their relationships, and they certainly don't feel entitled to a happy, fulfilled life. Like I had one woman come in and say, I don't like my husband. I'm not enjoying my marriage, and I want you to help me learn how to live with that. So that often becomes the goal. The goal is to maintain the relationship, because that's what makes you a quote unquote good person, and not to discover what it is that would bring you life and energy.
Yeah. So I have to say that in my therapy work, whenever I have somebody come in who has this kind of background story of being raised by an emotionally immature parent, I often give them your book, and they say invariably, I feel seen. It's almost like this author was in my house while I was being raised. But part of what you're saying is that it corrupts the relationship between the child and the emotionally immature parent, but it also creates a more long-standing challenge for that individual to develop healthy relationships, to know their own boundaries, to know their self, to be able to have that flexibility of saying, like, this is important to me versus this is important to you, that instead they more intuitively and reflexively operate on what is good for the other person and sort of lose themselves. And so part of your work is helping people to figure out how to heal from that kind of a childhood. But in this new book, you address this question that also comes up for me a lot in the therapy room, which is, if you had an emotionally immature parent, are you doomed to raise your child in a way that leaves them feeling the same way that you did? And I'm curious what your answer to that question would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, because I've had young women come in as clients who say, I'm not going to have children, or they'll tell me, I decided not to have children because I didn't want to pass this on, or I knew I wouldn't be a good parent because of the way I was parented. And it's such a tragic loss, because if you have the self-reflection and the concern that you might treat your child the way that you were treated, or you might cause suffering to your child, to the point where you're going to spare that hypothetical child by not having it. To me, that is almost proof that you probably would have been a pretty good parent. I mean, because you can observe yourself, you have self-reflection, you're looking out for things that, that bothered you, you remember your childhood. The people who can remember and process what happened to them as children are far less likely to do that to their children later in life. This is not like we look for different metaphors to understand generational stuff. Genetics is not a good one. That's not a good metaphor because it's not like this thing is in you that's going to get passed down. It only gets passed down when you're not aware of how that same behavior affected you. If you remember what that was like and you don't want to do that to your child, you won't do that to your child. Now, I'm not saying that under stress or extraordinary circumstances, you might not snap at your child or do something that your father or your mother did to you that you can't believe that you just acted it out. I mean, I don't care what your parent was like. You put anybody under enough stress and they're likely to do things they regret. I mean, this is being human, right? We don't have a choice about always being ready with the perfect response. So I think it's important for people to realize that awareness, that self-awareness and the processing and work on your own experiences from childhood is the best protection that you can give your child to not re-experience the same thing. You know why? Because it would hurt you to do it to your child. If once we get it, once we understand how much something hurt us and how it affected us, and we remember that, it automatically makes it really hard to do to someone else because it brings that trauma back up for us because now it's accessible to us to feel. And we just don't want to go there. There's something in us that stops us there.
Yeah.
Now, we may not know what to do instead, but that's fine because you don't always have to know what to do. You can just stop and tell your child you're going to respond to this later if you don't know what to do. So that's a great topic. And the fear is so unwarranted if the person is already doing the work on themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I remember in one conversation you highlighting that one of the characteristics of emotionally immature people is the impossibility or certainly the big challenge of self-reflection. And so if you are self-reflecting, can I be a good parent? What would it take to be a better parent than I had? And, reflecting on what that was like for you as a child and how you would want to do it differently, that almost by definition sets you apart as having the capacity to be more emotionally mature. And the other thing, and I think we'll come back to this later, is this idea of part of what makes us more emotionally mature is that we are going to make mistakes and we'll handle those mistakes. We'll respond to when those mistakes happen very differently than when our parent made mistakes. So it's not the mistakes that are different, it's the response. And you talk a lot about this in your book, and I just love that.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of research about the healthy importance of the process of making mistakes as a parent and how that actually strengthens your child's trust in you and your child's sense of their own effectiveness. And let me explain what I mean there. The research is primarily by Ed Tronick, who did a lot of parent-child, mostly mother-child interaction. And what he found was that if the mother who maybe makes a quote-unquote mistake, like she doesn't respond to the child or the child begins to get upset because the mother didn't do something, and the mother comes back in and tries to repair the breach in their connection. She gets their attention, she engages them again, and the baby is perfectly ready to turn and go toward the positive interaction. The baby knows, okay, now we're back on track. It's like, okay, the wheels came off the track, now we're back on track. And the babies seem to feel that and get back in the slot of the relationship very easily. And he thinks that creates a deeper sense of trust in the child because the child now knows, hey, even when mom and I hit a rough spot, or dad and I, whoever the caregiver is, we can go through a kind of a difficult time together, but we always kind of get it back on track. And that kind of trust in that we have a process and that we can have rough times, but they can get better. I mean, that's an invaluable outlook to have on life. And the other one is because when the babies are fussing or crying or expressing distress, in his experiments, he had the mothers stop responding with their facial expressions to the baby, which drove the baby crazy. Babies do not like that. And the baby would cry and arch their back and carry on. And then after a couple minutes, the mother would reanimate and come back online with the child, and then everything would get back together. But Tronick felt that those babies learned, hey, I can make things happen. I have the power to engage people and bring them back into interaction with me. And he was like, how else would the child learn that except that they were able to have their reaction and have their parent then respond to them? I mean, that is proof of your efficacy, in a relationship.
I think that highlights two things for me. One is that it's actually helpful for us to think about the benefits of making mistakes because there's so much learning and growth that happens. So rather than worrying about being imperfect, see it as something that gives you and your child opportunity to learn that good relationships sometimes go off the tracks. And that's not the problem. The problem is having the skill over time to know how to bring it back. And the second thing is this idea of we have influence on our relationships, and to help our children know that, but also to recognize that in ourselves, that we can have influence when mistakes happen, and we can teach our child how to have influence when things that don't feel good happen. And that is a part of all close relationships. So it's great to have those learning opportunities in the parent-child relationship.
Yeah, and I just want to mention here, while we're on the subject of mistakes, that I think it's the last chapter in the book is why you don't have to be perfect. But there was a great quote from a developmental researcher, George Valiant. And what he said was, what goes right in childhood predicts the future far better than what goes wrong. And he knew what he was talking about because he worked with people from the time that they were kids. I think this cohort or this group of research subjects was inner city. And then he picks up with them again, like when they're 30 or 40 years old. And what he found was that there were these elements in their lives, including their own personality characteristics, that when they were there, they were what predicted actually how well they were doing as adults. It wasn't the trauma, it wasn't the hardship, it wasn't the poverty. It was these good things that they had. So I thought that was tremendously reassuring.
Did you know that standard fridge and pitcher filters do little to remove most contaminants, and bottled water contains microplastics, and that contaminated water, which often looks clear, can put you at risk for myriad health problems? Well, AquaTrue is a countertop water purifier with a 4-stage reverse osmosis system that is certified to remove 84 contaminants and microplastics. 98% of AquaTrue customers say their water is cleaner, safer, and healthier. And as an AquaTrue customer myself, I agree. So if you want to join us for cleaner, safer, healthier water, head to aquatrue.com now and get 20% off your purifier using promo code POTC. AquaTrue even comes with a 30-day best tasting water guarantee or your money back. Take the guesswork out of pure, great tasting water with this exclusive podcast-only offer now at aquatrue.com. That's AQUATRU.com using promo code POTC.
Hey therapists, this is for you. I want you to know about Simple Practice, an all-in-one EHR that is HIPAA compliant, high-trust certified, and built specifically for therapists. I've been in private practice for about 7 years, and I've used Simple Practice since I first started. Simple Practice helps me streamline everything. I just send each new client a link, and they log on to my portal to access my consent form, billing, invoices, and set up appointment reminders. I even use Simple Practice as my HIPAA-compliant telehealth video platform. It frees up admin time so I can focus on the important stuff, seeing my clients. And I'm not the only POTC co-host who uses it. Emily does too, and Jill uses it to manage her group practice. If you're just starting out or growing your practice, there's also a credentialing service that takes the headache out of insurance enrollment, which will save you a lot of time and effort. Simple Practice is trusted by over 250,000 health and wellness professionals, and you can feel that in how thoughtfully it's built for our work. If you're ready to simplify the business side of your practice, now is the perfect time to try Simple Practice. Start with a 7-day free trial and then get 50% off your first 3 months. Just go to simplepractice.com to claim the offer. Again, that's simplepractice.com.
I think so too. So speaking of positive, so we talked a little bit about what emotional immaturity looks like. And I wonder if you can give a description of what emotional maturity looks like. Like what kinds of characteristics are we trying to foster in our children and in ourselves also?
Right. Yeah. Good to know the direction that you're trying to go with. Well, I think you can look at sort of outside characteristics like, you can be reasonable. You can be measured in your responses. You're not overly impulsive. You can have good relationships. These are all kind of characteristics of how you're living a life that works because you have good impulse control, you have good emotional control and stability, and you are able to have a vision of yourself, where you're headed and what you're interested in. And those are all kind of like external characteristics of emotional maturity. Basically, you're able to deal with life like a grown-up. You're not having tantrums because things aren't going your way. You're not expecting everybody else to do whatever it is that you want to do. You can bear some frustration. You can have long-term goals. These are all signs of maturity that we recognize. But it's like the iceberg. Like that's what's showing on top. But underneath the ballast of this is the early relationship with the caregivers, with the parents, or the people who are serving as the parents. That is the huge anchor to what it is that shows in the behavior on the surface. And that connection, the attachment, the world building that goes on between parent and child in the very early years is crucial to develop not only a sense of self, like this is who I am and I continue across time, but a sense of the world. This is the way the world works. This is the way reality works. I mean, it's almost like we came to an alien planet. We knew nothing. We had to learn everything from scratch. And yet, we get all of this by constant trial and error and interactions with our adults when we're little children. All of that construction, that's why I think in the subtitle of the book, it's your blueprint too. It's because you are constructing a human being with your relationship and your attitudes, your mindsets toward your children. And you are giving them, not deliberately or explicitly, but everything about your interactions with them is teaching them what to expect from other people, what to expect in the world, and how to feel about themselves. And one of the things that is tremendously important with that is recognizing that the child has an inner world, that they have an inner subjective experience. We've gotten so behavioral and cognitive in psychotherapy that, we tend to see things in solution-focused ways that sometimes don't really get into the nitty-gritty of the subjective, unique experience. But that's what little children need. They need someone who's willing to get in there and teach them about emotions and be curious about what's going on inside of them and what their imaginations are doing in there. So all of that that's the ballast that has to be there in order for these, important things in grown-up life to show up later on.
I love this model of parenting because it's so relationally focused. It's not outcome focused. It's not like specific behavior focused. It's about how we relate to our kids. And I actually did want to ask you about this one mindset that you're making reference to, which is this idea that how we conceptualize our child is foundational for our relationship with them and for fostering their emotional maturity in whatever developmentally appropriate way.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what does it mean in practice to see your child as an individual with a valuable inner life, with their internal experiences and their imagination, rather than just a child to be managed? And I do think that there are common mistakes that parents make in this. And so I wonder if you can help us visualize, like, what does this look like when it's done well?
Unfortunately, in Western cultures especially, there's a tendency to look at people from the outside in. That is, we tend to focus on appearance, behavior, measurable, quantifiable things, and then we try to influence that with our behavior and our external things. But there's a whole communication that is going on all the time between people that has to do with the resonance between people, essentially their emotional centers in the brain and the relational parts of the brain. And that is what we need to tune into in order to begin to see more deeply what it is that motivates our child and what it is that they're trying to communicate to us. If you conceptualize your child as having an inner world, it makes you stop and think for a minute when you're about to do or say something, because it reminds you that there is stuff going on inside them, just like it is with you. I think for years and years, we have tended to see children as, not quite as sensitive as we are, because they seem so happy-go-lucky and nothing seems to bother them, and they just keep making the same mistakes over it. It just, they just bumble around. And we think they're not as sensitive as we are. And so we have to teach them, and we have to, have control and power over them. But actually, they are, just as sensitive, just as emotionally responsive as we are. But if you can remember that they are just the same as you are, they have the same sense of dignity, they have the same capacity for embarrassment, they have the same capacity to get their feelings hurt, to feel ashamed, to be sorry for what they did. We tend to think that that this hasn't developed in them yet or something. And so we can teach them with a heavy hand about the way things are supposed to be done but really they're just like us. So one of the things that I, would tell people is just don't do what you wouldn't like someone to do to you. Like if you made a mistake, would you want someone to say, "What are you doing?" Or "What's the matter with you? Why'd you do that?" These are things that would not be pleasant for an adult to hear if they've made a mistake or they didn't know that it was wrong. But somehow with children, we feel like we have to use this very heavy sort of, authority with them in order to get a point across. So if we just get that one mindset down, that they are as real and as sensitive inside as we are, it's going to change how you treat them and how you approach them. But lots of times, people just haven't been basically educated that children have that emotional development very, very early in life. And that sensitivity is profound.
I do think that we live in this era where we just tend to dehumanize one another in general. And it's this weird application because we love our kids so much. But I think part of what you're saying is we forget to see them as fully human. And they are different kinds of humans, right? They're, earlier in their development. But they still are themselves. They are people on the inside with all the things that people come with. And so I just really love this idea of going about parenting as a relational enterprise rather than like producing something, behavior or, an athlete or a professional.
Yes.
Like what you're trying to produce is a relationship that honors that there's two people with all of their personhood involved. But I had a question that popped into my head, which is one of the things that I think is really useful and honestly very fun to do as a parent is to be curious actively about your child's inner world. Like, what was that like for you? And share, here's what it was like for me. But one thing that I often hear from friends and clients is that their children don't want to share with them. And so I'm just kind of curious what your advice would be.
I think you kind of have to pretend that children are like the most fascinating little creatures that ever lived, and which I think they are.
I think they are too. They'll always surprise you.
They'll always surprise you, but they're not conversational in the way that adults are. Now, adults, once we get this magnificent left hemisphere of our brain going, we can talk all day long, okay, and we can socialize at parties and speak at length without saying anything. Children do not do that. They get right to the point, they tell you what it is, and then they're done. So these communications or these sharings, I think people think, oh, I'm not having a conversation with them, or I asked them a question that gave me a quick answer, and then it didn't go anywhere, so I'm not doing it right. If I was doing it right, they'd be sitting down with me and saying, Mom, Dad, let me tell you what happened and how I felt about it. No, children are not like that. They don't enjoy that. They don't get the point of it. They will give you a short answer, and your job is to be very interested in that and show that on your face and in your eye contact and say things like, "Oh, really? Well, that's really interesting. Did you think that they were such and such, And then they'll say, no, that's all you have to do. I love what you said about, this is relational. It's not production. It's not quantity. We're not trying to get as many words out of our kids as we can in order to prove that we have a good relationship with them. It doesn't work that way. It's that they are willing to give us an answer, which may be a word or two. And all we have to do is be very interested in that and curious, and then we'll get another chance, not too long afterwards to do that again. And it proceeds in these little dribs and drabs like that. But if you give eye contact, turn and give your attention to your child when you ask them about something, they give you the answer, interaction is complete, relational connection's been made. Your job is done in that moment. Okay.
Yeah.
They've gotten a lot from you.
Yeah. I think that mindset, that attitude of like, I'm here and interested, like you can give me a little bit, I'm interested, you can give me a lot, I'll be excited.
Yes.
And it kind of feeds itself. But it gets me to another question that I wanted to ask, because I think a lot of these mindsets sort of presuppose that your child has certain traits. And I wanted to ask specifically about this mindset that our child is intrinsically driven to grow, because I've also heard from peers and from clients that some kids seem really like they're trying to demonstrate to their caregiver and peers maybe that they're not intrinsically driven to grow and mature and sort of expand into their full adulthood, at whatever stage they're at. And so I'm curious, what do we do when our kid seems determined to prove that they are not driven to grow, when the advice is really to see them as inherently motivated to do that, which I think is good advice, but sort of what do you do with that tension when a child is kind of saying, no, that's not me?
Yeah, well, if there's tension there around that, it really is up to the parent to make the assumption that they may need to reevaluate their expectations for the child, and ask themselves honestly, what does the child spend time doing? What is the child fascinated by? What does the child gravitate toward? If you go to a place where there's stores or whatever, what is the child interested in? But what happens in a kind of a market-driven economy is that we are so afraid that our children are not going to be driven enough to make it in this very competitive economy, a worldwide economy that we have now. And so we're always fearful and looking for, are they kind of interested in the right things? Are they willing to work hard enough to get what they need in life? And the parents are so nervous about this that it makes it very hard for them to pay attention to what the child is actually showing them that they do like to do. Because the parents are like, no, you need to get off of that horse and get on this horse because this horse is going in the right direction.
Yeah, this horse will look good on your college application.
Exactly. And the child is like, it'd be like if someone, came to you or me, Yael, and said, we think you should be an engineer. It might not float with us,
It would not.
So we have to ask ourselves, in what areas does the child seem interested in growing? For instance, you might be in a very high-powered family that values intellectual achievement, going to college, getting multiple degrees, becoming a white-collar professional. And what happens if you have a child who is artistic, or they like digging in the dirt, or they like making things with their hands, or they like taking the lawnmower apart? I mean, now what happens, okay, inside that parent as they envision the future for their child? And as a therapist, I know that you've been through this too. One of the saddest things in the world is to have somebody come in and talk about their depression and come to realize that they have not been living the life that would bring them any kind of joy or energy, because they were evaluating everything externally, as their parents did, about how to get ahead in life. And so to ask themselves the question, am I happy? Is this energizing to me? It was like, well, what's the point of that? I already know which way to go. I already know which way I'm supposed to grow. I wanted to mention one other thing that occurred to me this morning, Yael, when I was thinking about our conversation today. And that is, have you ever seen these, they're fruit trees, but they're called espalier. You put them up against a wall, and the wall supports the tree. And then they trim the tree so that the branches actually go out and then are attached to the wall. So what you get is a two-dimensional tree, and it bears fruit, and the fruit is all exposed to the sun and gets lots of air, and it's good for fruit production. And it's a beautiful form. It's almost like a bonsai. But that tree, whatever it was meant to be as a tree, is, nowhere to be found. That is not a 3D tree. It is a productive, created tree, but it has lost whatever it would need to be a tree in the world without that wall. You cannot take the wall away from an espalier tree and have it be able to stand on its own. So we want to, think about that metaphor of, how do you want your child to put their roots down? How do you want them to be able to balance themselves in life and be a 3D person who can deal with complexity and stress and whatever without such a narrow path that they only have one avenue toward feeling good about themselves and their success?
I love that metaphor. One other thing that it made me think of is this conversation that I had with an author of a book called Both and Thinking, about this idea that we sometimes are asking the wrong question, especially when we ask in an either or fashion. So part of what I hear you saying is, rather than asking, is my child intrinsically driven to grow or not? The question is, how, in which direction is my child intrinsically motivated to grow? And that orients you differently to the response of, like, you're looking for signs of, like, what direction your child wants to grow in, as opposed to, are they growing in the way I would expect or not? The other thing it made me think of too is actually a book that you sent me, Range by Dave Epstein.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many take homes. It's a terrific parenting book. I mean, it's a terrific book, and I think all parents should read it. But
I think it actually is a parenting book in a way.
Yeah. I mean, it ranges in the topics that it addresses, but certainly I thought a lot about parenting in it. But one sort of pocket of, one sort of idea that he left me with is that part of what's useful about exposing our kids to lots of different things is that certain things will light a kid up and certain things will not. Like when I took a psychology course, it lit me up. I thought I was going to be a doctor or a vet, and I had to grind my way through. I did not do well on those courses. And then I took a psychology course and I was like, this is it. This is what I love. And if we come in with all sorts of preconceptions about our kids, as opposed to letting them taste from all the different things that exist in the world, we might not discover the thing that lights them up. And so, like you said, there's all these market forces that create so much pressure. And one of them is, get your child to specialize early. And there's many downfalls to that, which is why Range is such a great book. But one of them is that, what if that's not the thing that lights your kid up? And what if the thing that lights them up is out there, and it is, and you're not giving them the freedom to try to find it?
Yes. And the other thing I was thinking of as you were saying that, and I love that expression of being lit up because you can see that on their face. And that's what I was talking about when I said, watch for what it is that they're interested in. What are they willing to persevere on? What are they willing to keep working at? And it's because they're lit up. Okay. I mean, we read psychology books because it has that effect on us. The other thing I wanted to mention is that your child, as they're growing up, is getting a different brain every year, 2 years going on. The interests and the fascinations and the things that they want to do, when they're 8 are going to be very different from when they're 15, from 22, 32. Okay. Because we are having different parts of our brain sort of come online. So lots of times parents will be like, oh my gosh, well, she can't make a living as an artist, or, he thinks he's going to be able to, become a skateboard champion, or, whatever it is. Well, wait until their early 20s, maybe, when their frontal lobes are, fully matured and they've got this race car of a brain now because their brain is fully matured. They're able to do all this thinking and this conceptualization. Wait until that comes online and find out what they find interesting, what lights them up. It's like you don't know what their final brain is going to push them toward. And sometimes people, find their thing later than we would expect in life. Because like you're saying, they get exposed to it, and we don't have to have everything planned out by the time they're 16.
Yeah. To me, it's just encouragement to see your child as like a beautiful mystery and like to nourish all the different parts of them that emerge along the way.
Yes.
And I think that we do, it's like there's a book by Alison Gopnik called The Gardener and the Carpenter, I think.
Yeah.
And it's this idea that we often think like we're going to carpentry our child into some kind of output. But instead, parenting is more like gardening. And sometimes we're given a bulb that we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we need to sort of figure out in which direction it wants to grow.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. It really is, because like, what is this going to be?
Yeah.
But that's what I mean about the mindset. Like if you have the mindset that inside that little shoot that just came up from the ground, there is all the information that it needs, and it's going to actualize itself as what it was supposed to be. And all you have to do is do the things that are necessary to help it along. And then you can be surprised.
You may have noticed that it's allergy season already, and pretty soon it will be wildfire season. I'm taking care of myself and my family with my new Air Doctor air purifier. It's giving me peace of mind and extra protection from allergens and wildfire smoke. Air Doctor's powerful 3-stage filtration captures extremely small particles, about 100 times smaller than what typical air purifiers can remove. It captures airborne contaminants you definitely don't want to be breathing in: dust, pollen, mold spores, pet dander, wildfire smoke, bacteria, viruses, odors, smoke, ozone, and volatile organic compounds. It's whisper quiet while it's running, not loud like other air filters on the market, and its auto mode feature ensures optimal air 24/7. You'll get reminders to change your filter so you don't need to remember or guess when to do it. Air Doctor won Newsweek's Reader's Choice Award for Best Air Purifier. Head to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code POTC to get up to $300 off today. Air Doctor comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee plus a 3-year warranty, an $84 value free. Get this exclusive podcast-only offer now at airdoctorpro.com, airdoctorpro.com, using promo code POTC.
Running a podcast means that you're wearing a lot of hats and keeping track of a lot of to-do lists. It can be quite overwhelming. We have learned that finding the right tool can be a real game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Heinz to brands just getting started. Tackle all those important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. No need to save multiple websites or try to figure out what platform is hosting the tool you need. Everything is in one place, making your life easier and your business operations smoother. And what if I get stuck, you ask? Shopify is always around to share advice with their award-winning 24/7 customer support. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/POTC. Go to shopify.com/POTC. That's shopify.com/POTC.
So this brings me to another question about understanding. And as you know, Lindsay, and as all of our listeners probably know, I'm very interested in why people misunderstand one another. Mm-hmm. And we will misunderstand our children. Yes. And you write that it's okay not to understand your child, but what we should do is try to create an environment in which they won't conclude that they're not understandable. So I wonder if you can explain sort of the distinction between understanding and being understandable. And then also a second question, which is, how do we close the gap when we are genuinely baffled by our child?
Well, it's like with any relationship, we don't always understand each other's experience. We really don't understand. When that happens, you know it and they know it, okay? You know that you haven't achieved that click between you, that right brain resonance click, where it's like, I get you. An old word from a book a long time ago was grokking. I get it, I grok it. You know when that doesn't happen. So what do you do when that happens? You keep trying. You try to find another way. You ask a different question. And that curiosity and that effort to clarify, because you'll usually we kind of know what doesn't make sense to us. We'll say, well, are you saying, but what about this? We will have the places that are sticking for us when we don't understand. And we try to clarify. If we're good communicators, we ask them, are you saying this or what about that? And when you do that, the other person, in this case, your child, is listening back and they're trying to say, well, did they get it yet? And then they adjust and try to help you understand it. That process is essentially one person saying to the other, I am fascinated by what's going on inside you, and I want to understand you. And I'm trying my best to try to figure out how this is experienced by you. Can you help me with this? It's a collaborative effort. And when the child experiences anybody sticking with it to try to understand what they're saying, that is experienced as love. That's experienced as high regard, as respect, okay, and interest. Let's go worst case scenario. You still don't understand what they're trying to say, or you're so far in disagreement with it, you can't understand where they're coming from. So what would you do with an adult that you couldn't understand? You would say something along the lines of, I'm not sure that I understand how this feels to you or why it seems this way to you. I think I see it differently. But we should really come back and talk about this more, because if you think of anything else that you can help me understand it, I would love to hear it, because I think this is a really interesting thing that we're trying to communicate about. The door's left open. The person knows that you're admitting you don't understand. But relationally, everything is flowing. Everything is going well, even if you don't understand the other person completely. So that's the part about you're showing faith. I think you are understandable. I think you have feelings that can be understood. I think you have ideas that can be understood. I'm not getting it right now, but that's okay. We can readdress it another time. And the child feels like, oh, okay, I can be understood. Maybe I'll find another way of putting it. Or, if they want something, maybe I'll find another tack to take to get mom to, do this or that with me.
We should do more of that in our adult relationships, because it is a powerful thing when somebody says, I really don't understand you, but I want to, and I'm going to continue to try. It's not like one and done. It's not a destination. It's a journey. It's a collaborative process. And to receive the message from somebody that you care about, that you are worth understanding and that they have optimism that they can sort of get to the place and that they're willing to put in the effort is such a great feeling. If you, listener, have been in the receiving end of that, you know how it feels. And so can we offer that gift to our children when they're baffling us?
Yes. And one study actually looked at how people felt when, I think this was with partners, when the person didn't understand them and sort of gave up, and when the other person couldn't understand them but kept trying. And they found that the relationship was strongest with the people, even though they didn't feel understood on that point. The fact that the partner was trying to understand them, that was sort of a much higher score in terms of the health of the relationship. So if it's like with anything, if somebody else is trying with you, we recognize that, and it feels relational to us. It feels like we're being accepted, and it's incredibly satisfying.
Lindsay, I could talk to you forever and pick your brain about parenting and relationships. And thankfully, you are my friend, so I get to call on you. But this will have to be the end of this podcast episode. But I want to end with a quote from your book. And there is just so many powerful nuggets in the book, and I really recommend people pick it up. But I love this quote because it speaks to one of the dilemmas of all relationships, including our parenting-child relationship. And it goes as follows. When you become self-accepting about not having control over everything, you will be a calmer, wiser, and more resilient parent. There is much in parenting that is not up to us. Your child is not a machine, but a living individual with their own path. You can't control the outcome that you want for them, but you can teach them things and you can influence the quality of your relationship with them. Thank you, Lindsay, for joining me today. And where can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Yael. It's just the most enjoyable time whenever we get a chance to talk like this. You can go to my website, which is lindsaycgibson.com. But actually, most of the stuff that's out there is on YouTube, it's on Instagram, it's on TikTok. You just Google my name and a bunch of stuff will come up.
Including Lindsay's appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Might I add.
That too.
You've been everywhere. It's amazing. I love it. I love to see good work and good people getting out there. And Lindsay is good people and her writing is really powerful. So I really highly recommend it. Thank you so much, Lindsay.
Thank you for having me. I loved it.
Thanks for sticking around for the co-host post. I'm here with Emily to discuss this conversation that I had with Lindsay Gibson. She's just such a wise voice in the space of parenting with a great amount of humanity, both for the parent and the child. And Emily, I thought a lot about you, both in the lead up to the conversation and during the conversation, because so much of what we discussed really reflects on autonomy-supportive parenting. So I am really curious to hear what your thoughts about my conversation with Lindsay are.
So I loved the focus on having that relational framework around parenting, along with the emphasis on really understanding your child as their own person. It sounds a little common sense, but it's not if we really think about our relationships with our kids, because we know them from when they're little lumps and aren't doing anything, right? As we carry them around. But this is everything in autonomy-supportive parenting. If you can really always be curious about your child's inner world and their experience as different from yours, this goes such a long way in terms of building up the relatedness piece of nurturing autonomy and their sense of self, which is a huge piece of autonomy. So I just loved how much time you both spent on this and the importance of the child's growth, emotional growth, personal growth, and the contrast with where you started the interview, which is discussing Lindsay's first book around emotionally immature parents of adult children, right? Like, this is how we raise emotionally mature children, is that they are in touch with who they are and they feel accepted, loved, and seen for who they are.
Yeah, I love how you're describing Lindsay's framework, because I think that's spot on. And I do think it's complicated work as a parent to see our child's inner world, because they start as almost an extension of ourselves, right? Even when they're out of our body, they're still so attached to us. and they don't have so much of an inner world going on. And so we've got to kind of evolve along with it and sustain that curiosity about who is my child. And I do think, I don't know, even just catching yourself having the thought, like, I know exactly what my child is thinking, and replacing it with the question of, I wonder how they'll surprise me. And, recognizing that you can know somebody really well and still have more to discover. And that's a wonderful thing. And to, absorb yourself in that practice, because it's a lot of fun to see your child with a lot of curiosity and wonder and amazement at how they've evolved and surprised you over time.
I mean, it really is the gift of parenting. Parenting can be such a grind. And I don't mean being around your child. I mean the tasks of parenting, right? And the energy it takes. It can really be wearing. But this is it. This is the meaning that comes from the day in, day out, right? Is really looking at your child and seeing, oh my goodness, they know who they are. They know what they want in this world, even if that's when they're 25 or whenever it happens at whatever stage and whatever iterations. It is really the most wondrous experience of parenting. I wanted to say one thing before we go, which is I want to applaud our generation of parents for really being the first generation to be so focused on our relationships with our children and emotional health and resilience. And this is partly because there's been a lot more science about it and research informing our understanding of our children's emotional well-being, and we're acting on it. And I just think, as hard as parenting is and as many risks and struggles that we're facing in modern parenting, this is what we're doing for our children that will serve future generations that much more. So we are a generation of parents are more emotionally mature, raising an emotionally mature generation of kids. And that's my opinion.
I think that's a beautiful place to end, because I think so much of the news articles and podcasts feel so doomsday, but tools like Lindsay's and so many of the tools that we share on the podcast, and Emily, your book, like, we have a lot of strengths and resources, and there's a lot of reason to feel proud of how we're raising the next generation. So thanks so much for joining us for this conversation. And if there are thoughts that people have, feel free to reach out to us. We always love to hear from listeners.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. You can now listen to our podcast ad-free by becoming a supporter on Patreon. You can link to Patreon on our website or go to patreon.com/offtheclocksite.
If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review and sharing this episode with a friend or an enemy who would enjoy it.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our fabulous newsletter on Substack. Or if you're still addicted to social media, find us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
We'd like to thank our rockstar production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
Now for the boring part. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.